Hello again, it's Matt here from getyourfirstcodingjob.com. The reason for today's video is one of the things that I've been saying and that people are liking and wanting to engage in discussion with is this idea that if you are new to programming and you're going to go and try and get a job, you don't really need a portfolio of example code to demonstrate to potential employers what you can do. What you need are one or two really good examples of pieces of code that you've written. I've talked, I think, in another video already about why that's the case, but what I want to address in today's video is, well, what should those pieces of code examples be? How do you write good code if you're only going to be able to demonstrate your ability in either some short pieces of code or things that employers are going to be able to look at quickly and say, okay, yeah, this person knows what they're talking about. And the best way I can answer that is by throwing at you a number of questions for you to think about, because I think this is quite an individual choice. I'll give you an example, which is actually the first, what I'm going to call, good piece of code that I recall writing. It was many years ago. So I wasn't working as a programmer at the time, and actually I had a part-time weekend and student holiday job in my local library. And in the library, I was scanning books in and when people wanted to borrow books and when they brought books back. And of course, people would occasionally come in and search for things. And it occurred to me that one of the things you couldn't do with the library's computer system was find things if you didn't know the correct spelling. And so I thought, well, actually, a sounds like search might be quite a nice feature. So I came home and I replicated this idea on a computer I had. I didn't build a full library system, but I just picked up this one idea. And just to give you an example, at the time I had lots of cassette tapes, that's telling you my age, and a number of those tapes were by a band called Erasure. In case you've not heard of them, that's spelled E-R-A-S-U-R-E. And I thought, well, it would be great if I didn't know how to spell that and I was searching for eraser, spelled E-R-A-S-E-R, which sounds pretty close. Could I write some code that if you searched for eraser, it would find erasure? And so that was the first piece of code I wrote, a sounds like search. And I'm not saying that particular piece of code got me my first programming job, because it was quite a long time in between doing that piece of code and getting the job. But that I think is quite a good example of something that is unique to me. It was my specific idea. I'm sure it's something that's been done by loads of people lots of times, possibly far better than the way I did it. But it gave me something I could talk about that I fully understood. I was able to talk about the reasoning, why it would add to the existing system if they were to implement something like that. It gave me a great sort of foundation for being able to present to potential employers. So for you to find your project, I'm going to throw at you a number of questions. And they are, the starting point is, actually, so this isn't a question. This is really just to remind you, what's the reason for employers wanting to write software? It's to either automate a process, so that's something that could be done manually, but by having software to do it, it's either quicker or it's less expensive, or maybe it's more accurate, or it can be repeated lots of times. There's a reason to automate something that could be done manually. Or it's something that can't be done manually because it would just be too hard, it would take too long. So the only way to achieve it is with some software. Or it could be to do something which a competitor does, but you want to do it in a better way or a different way. So you can't just go and buy some software off the shelf to do it. You've got to create your own. So that's a starting point to sort of give you a foundation for things to be thinking about. Now let me throw you then these questions. So the first question is, what do you know well as a process? So have you worked somewhere? Have you done something regularly in your life that's a manual process that you think, actually, I could have a go at automating that process? It could be something as simple as reconciling your bank statement at the end of every month, if you get it, through to something more complicated, like, I'm trying to come up with ideas here. Well, I don't want to give you ideas, actually. I want you to come up with the ideas that are bespoke to you. But certainly thinking about the processes you're familiar with. Second question, have you used some software or used a website or used an app where you've thought, wouldn't it be so much better or so much easier if it did this? If so, you've identified a feature that's missing. Could you write something to demonstrate that feature? Okay, that's the second question. The third question is, what problem can you solve better than you've seen it being done elsewhere? That could be quite a tricky one, but thinking about, if you've used some software to solve a problem, what could be done better? Quite an example of that might actually be you might have a better way of laying out the buttons on a calculator to make it quicker and easier to use, right? That's the kind of thing that might lead to an idea that would be something unique that you could use, you could build up and show that it's better or that it isn't. And the final one, and I quite like this one, is what could you do that would be useful in the real world? So we could all create a piece of software that would demonstrate people ordering pizzas, right? And you select your pizza toppings and the pizza gets cooked and it goes out for delivery. We could all write that, but that's been done thousands of times by lots of people. It's not that exciting and it's not that useful in the real world. Is there anything you can come up with that would be useful in the real world? Because again, that makes it interesting. It makes it worth talking about. It makes it worth looking at in a bit more detail. When you've got your project, think about the edge cases. What are the things that could happen that might break it, that would be the unusual things that could happen? And try and write your software to deal with those, not just with the things that you expect to happen. So for example, if you're reconciling your bank statement, if you're writing some software to do that, and you might get a transaction appear on your bank statement with a figure of 0, which you're not expecting. That doesn't make any sense, right? All transactions have got to have a monetary amount, but maybe something occurs with a figure of 0. Should that be allowed? That might be this edge case. If so, make sure your application can deal with it. And the final thing is, don't just make it a CRUD system. If you're not familiar with the term CRUD, that means create, read, update, delete. Don't really just make it a simple way to store data and retrieve that data or to edit that data. Make it have meaning, make it have value. And the way you do that is there needs to be some element of business logic in there. There needs to be some kind of calculation or some kind of working things out or some kind of checking going on. If it's simply I can type in a number and that gets stored and later on I can retrieve that number, that's boring. To make it interesting, it's got to do something with that data, not just be a repository for storing it. Well, I hope that's given you some food for thought. If you want to discuss your ideas, then you're very welcome to get in touch. You can get hold of me via the website, which is getyourfirstcodingjob.com. On that website, what you'll actually see is a link to download my free playbook with some tips on how to get hired. But if you click on that link, do the download, you'll actually then be taken to a page where you can book a call with me. That would be a 45-minute call where we can have a chat about where you are right now, where you're trying to get to, and maybe we'll see if I can help. Okay, well, thanks for watching. It's been a bit of a longer video today, but I look forward to seeing you again very soon.